Okay, just to catch up. Yesterday, I had to remove the MSD Ignition Module to get it out of the way of accessing the voltage regulator on the inside fender. I also had to unbolt the starter relay so I could get back down to where the regulator was located. And then I took a 10mm socket to try to unscrew the nut, retaining nut, and all I did was spin with the bolt. The bolt is from the inside of the outside of the inner fender wall. The nut is on the other side. So normally that means jacking the car up, taking off the tire and wheel, having a wrench or socket inside the fender well and on the inner fender well, and try to unscrew the nut from the bolt. But I decided that, you know what, I am going to try to use a 1/4 inch impact driver to spin that nut off fast enough where I don't have to take the wheel off to get this apart. I may have to do it, take off the wheel and tire so I can reassemble it, but right now all I'm concerned about is getting it apart. So hopefully this will have enough juice and speed to do what I want to do. We'll see. Nope. All right, so what I'm going to do next is lift the whole car up, raise the front end and block it, take off the tire and wheel so I can get a wrench up inside the fender and hold the bolt in place while I attempt to unscrew the nut once again. Apparently, when this is hammering away at the nut, the bolt is spinning with it, so they got stuck together. And that happens, nature of the beast. No real big surprise. Okay, so I'm not gonna bother videotaping me jacking the car up and take off the wheel and all that. I'll come back and pick up once I'm ready to start to take the regulator off. This comes as a cautionary warning. There is no job that is so simple on these cars that it can't turn into a 3-hour or 4-hour or longer effort because something doesn't go quite as expected. This is one of those times. Okay. Say hi to Mr. Z.
Hello, Mr. Z.
Okay. Now, here's what we've got. This is the voltage regulator we took off. Usually, this top piece that is gray on ours is either silver, like that, or it's blue. And it could be real flat, or it could be about that high. And it's held on by 2 nuts and bolts. One goes in this ear, one in this ear. Now, I will show you inside the wheel well where the bolts and nuts were located, where I worked with Linda to get them loosened. Here is the lower bolt that goes through the fender, inner fender metal and there's a nut on the other side, and that's what holds the lower part of the regulator. Up here, a little higher, is another hole where the bolt came through from the other side, and then tightened with a nut inside the inner fender. So it was a bit of work for us to get it off because we had all kinds of other things we had to take off, one of which you won't have. The red ignition module you won't have, but the starter relay you will. So I'll try and make some more sense of it in a few moments as we begin to put this together. But for right now, we are replacing that voltage regulator with this unit. And the terminal end that plugged into the voltage regulator plugs into this. But the wires, we're going to be rewiring a little differently, and I'll show you how that is done. But for right now, I'm going to have Linda put this inside the inner fender on the engine side of it. And she's going to put that bolt through this lower mounting hole. And once she has that in place, I'll have her put the nut on the other end, and I'll tighten it down, but not too tight, because we have to move this top one around to get it in place. We can tighten it down. And this is a lot more tedious than pretty much any other part of this job. But once you get this done, the really hard part should be out of the way. I'll take some pictures and some video along the way as we make progress so you see what we're doing. Meanwhile, Linda is going to take this and try to get this bottom ear over that one bolt head.
Yeah, I can do that on video.
Oh.
Okay, just stop it.
Well, it has been a day and a half since Linda and I last worked on a Mach 1. Yesterday we had some things come up, and so we didn't get home until very late in the evening. Anyway, we did finally get the voltage regulator removed. And it was removed from down in this area beneath the starter relay. And what it took was there was a nut and bolt at each corner of this voltage regulator, and she had to be on the inside part of the engine compartment, and I had to be under the wheel well, where I had to take off the tire and wheel to get access up in that area for the nut and bolt on the other side of the air fender. And then we finally got it off. It was a bigger fight than one might imagine to get this little unit off. And I'm going to show you what the replacement unit looks like. And the replacement unit looks exactly like a voltage regulator does, but it's not. It really is a series of terminal connections internally that adapt the charging system wiring from adapt the charging system wiring for the 1973 and earlier alternator-based Mustangs to work with the third generation alternator we're going to be putting in here a little bit later on today. But first, I need to get this PA performance switch out and show you what it looks like, and then we'll install it. Well, I looked for the PA performance adapting switch in this box. I couldn't find it. Linda said, well, that's because we put it in place yesterday. It just isn't bolted in yet. So I'm hoping, yep, she's right, there it is. So we're going to go ahead and get that bolted up completely today. Plug in the wiring terminal connector and then make the changes necessary for the rest of the charging system wiring harness for the new alternator, the third generation alternator. I should tell you the reason why we haven't been able to video record all this work so far when we're actually doing it is because both of us are involved. And so Linda can't video record at the same time she's helping me turn wrenches. Otherwise, I would have recorded the whole thing. But I hope I'm backfilling enough information so what we're doing makes sense for my description.
I just did it myself.
Okay. Down here somewhere, we now have that PA performance charging system, switch system. I will double check and make sure it's plugged in at the one end. And because we were able to get it mounted and the mounting bolts and nuts tight, we got the tire wheel back on. So our next step is to take the center jack of this 4-post lift off of the right front part of the under subframe, get this all the way back down to the ground like it should be, and then we'll continue working on installing the third generation alternator, which is around here somewhere. And then I will complete this video, nearly complete it, showing how this PA performance switch gets wired into the original charging system harness. And then I will test the system to make sure we're getting amperage and voltage out of the alternator like we expect. Okay, we'll be back.
Go.
Okay, we have the tire wheel back on the Mustang. We let the center jack down so everything's back in the ground where it should be. And we have the 4-post lift down as far as it will go. So now I'm going to continue working here with putting the starter relay back in place, tightening it down, and then reinstalling this MSD Ignition Module and plugging it in. At that point, I'll go ahead and splice in this new alternator socket and the wires at the end that end up being spliced into the alternator wiring. You can't see it from where you are, but I can see it from where I am. But there's one of the sockets that has 2 of the wires I need to be connecting, and I'll be doing that using some crimp-on terminal connectors and shrink wrap tubing. And at some point I'll make sure the alternator goes in. I think I'll be able to do it while it's on camera, because I don't think, once it's kind of in place, I think it'll be pretty straightforward. And I'm sorry I said that, because now it's going to be hard. But anyway, I'll get the stuff I need together to do the installation of this and the ignition module, and then we'll be back for more video. And these are simply machine bolts that have sheet metal threading. Why is it making all that noise? That was a good fit, I thought. Oh, I see why. Because it wasn't anywhere it wants it to be. So the screw is griping at me. Boy, that is not very happy with me. There, nice and tight. This is a ratcheting box end wrench where the center goes in one direction and then alternately holds together, or I can reverse it and now it loosens. Very handy to have in tight quarters like that. Now, I was going to go ahead and try to trick everybody and pretend I was putting the other mounting bolt in for the starter relay, but I decided not to do that. I don't know where it is. It's not where the other one was. I put them there together. I might have dropped it. We'll find out when we roll this thing off the lift. I'll look for it. Luckily, it's not critical. It only takes one tight bolt to hold that relay in place, which not only mounts the relay, but it provides the ground current for electricity from the relay negative side to the frame of the car and back to the negative battery post. So it's important that it be tightened down with something that's going to let it conduct electricity. Now here, I had 3 screws holding this down, and now I've got to try to find them. You know, when I pull these things apart, bad habit of mine is I pull them apart real quick and I don't recall where all the screws wind up sometimes. In this case, I found them, but I'm going to ask Linda to get something near her left foot on the ground. One of those magnetic trays. Now I got a whole bunch of these magnetic trays when I ordered some parts from CJ Pony Parts. They have a magnet on the bottom. That magnet is really cool because it will stick to metal. But the other thing that's really cool is I can put nuts and bolts inside here. And the nuts and bolts stick. And so do they stick to this? I can then stick this thing to any kind of magnetic metal and it'll stay in place for me. So that's pretty cool, I think.
If we use them.
If I were to use them the way I should be. I didn't have these back in the old days, so it's an old habit of not having them and me getting careless. I need to break. Anyway, I found the 3 sheet metal screws used to mount the ignition module. Now this goes into a really tight spot. Tight because there's 3 holes I have to put those sheet metal screws through into existing holes in the inner fender. And this is going to take a couple of minutes for me to do. So I'm going to have this, maybe I'll do it on camera. If it gets to be too long, I'll just cut out the excess. Okay, see the top holes, and I see the bottom hole. If I get the 2 top ones in place and leave them a little loose, I'll be able to get this one in place, and I'll start by tightening that one down. This is actually the second time I will have installed that. That's because when I first got this car, I had the MSD Digital 6A module. I went to 6AL. The difference is that 6AL, I can adjust maximum engine RPM to limit the engine in the speed so I don't blow it accidentally by having it rev too high. So to install this, I had to do what I'm about to do right now, and there was a problem to do it then, just like it is now. Now before I install that, I'm going to check and make sure that my wiring for the old voltage regulator and the new charging system PA performance module are plugged in, and they weren't, so I'm going to plug them in now. And this is going to take a while because there's a bunch of wiring in my way. I want this to be a nice clean plug-in with no wires hanging around that shouldn't be in the way. Okay, it's plugged in. I'm going to ask you to take my word for it.
Okay, so we can see it.
Instead of making Linda come around and look for it. Now, another thing, the old charging system had a radio suppressor capacitor plugged into one of its leads. We don't need that anymore. I don't know what impact it might have with the new wiring, so I'm going to unplug it and just let it hang there. So the condenser for radio interference suppression is unplugged, and I have a light yellowish green wire plugging into nothing, and that's all it's there for, is for the regular voltage regulator to have radio suppression through the capacitor. No other reason for it. This gets installed so that the plug-ins is up. So I move all the wires out of the way, and then I just throw ahead and send this thing right down, and then I will carefully hand start the first 2 mounting screws. It doesn't take much to get it to start. What I am missing, here it is, a screwdriver. I want this one that I started to be a little bit tighter. So I hold that in the corner as I try to move this around to get the other hole lined up. freeing up some of the wiring near the bottom so it doesn't interfere with any to get pinched. I don't know if anybody heard that besides me, but I just dropped a bolt. Okay, I'll use this one, and then I'll go find the other one. I have a small magnetic retriever I can use to help with that. Okay, first two screws are in.
Okay, magnetic, I'm going to pause this. Magnetic thing is below you by the tire front. See it? And then did you know where it went, or do you want me to turn this off?
You keep recording. I'll clip it if I need to. Now for the hunt. I see it.
On the floor?
Yeah. No, on the frame. The orange end has a magnet. Black it does not have a magnet. So I'm going to run this down here and try to retrieve the screw. I found it a few moments ago visually. I shouldn't have taken my eye off it. Now I lost it again. I'll find it. I saw it before, I'll see it again.
I see two washers.
See it?
Oh, it went deeper.
Well, I had it for a moment.
You see it?
Nope.
Oh, it's attached to it. Pull it up, pull it up.
Oh.
You got two screws. Is that the one you're missing for the other thing?
No.
There it is.
Yes.
We found the other one.
This is a really rare 2-for-1. I went looking for one missing screw and I found two. One less thing to look for. Unless I lose it again. Okay. Here's the one for the ignition module. So before I tighten it down, I'm going to make sure that all the wiring is nice and free, nothing hanging. And then I'll see if I can get this screw started by hand, which I should be able to do fairly easily because the other two screws are in place. And they're tightened enough to start tightening, but not enough to make it tight. So I can still move it around if I have to. That's tight. Now, that's tight, and that's tight. And as with a lot of electrical devices, these screws not only mount this in place, but they also help act as a ground. And I say help because these better made electronic units, if they need a ground, they'll often include a ground wire in the circuit, typically an all black wire. So one way or another, this is set up and ready to go. So now I can simply plug this in, and now we're all set.
Okay, let's put that screw in for the...
Now for the other bolt to hold the relay,
I think you left it in front of you.
yes. Bad habit. I should put it inside the tray. I'm telling you, I'm like an old dog. Won't learn new tricks that these. You have to get hurt first. I don't suggest anyone hurt their old dog. So I'll loosen this one bolt. Now, if anyone's watching carefully, you'll see I'm using this real close to the positive battery terminal on the starter relay. That is why I have the battery unhooked on the negative post. I can hit that all day long and won't hurt a thing. If that had been on the battery, you would see a shower of sparks. You see a light show, not the kind I'd like to give. So I'll start threading this in by hand, and then I'll complete it with a ratcheting box end wrench. I didn't really have to have this, but it's nice to have it. Nice and solid. Okay. Now I could go ahead and start using this harness to hook up the new wiring to, but I think before I do that, I'm going to get the new alternator, the third generation alternator, in place physically, and then I'll play with this. I have lots of room to do it. Now the alternator should be fairly much the same size as the other one overall, but there are some places on the housing that are a little bit larger than the former alternator, so it might be a little hard for me to get this in place. I have to work it past here and the battery cable and a bunch of other stuff so that it will work for me. Meantime, I'm looking at the lower adjusting bracket, and I'm looking for the boss that this upper bolt goes into that holds it in place. So I want to make sure I have it all in my head, what has to go where, before I try to bolt this thing together. Otherwise, I could find myself in some serious trouble. I'm hunting. Found it, I think. No, that's not it. It's got to be over here further. It goes into the head, a boss in the head. Better to find it now than have to hunt for it while trying to suspend a 15-pound alternator. Now, I just don't do these things often enough to remain expert at them. I do them often enough to know that it's a real pain in the neck. Okay, it goes through here and then straight back. I found it. Okay. Now, this bolt is so long that at the wrong angle, it won't get past this fan housing. I don't want to take that fan off, so I'm going to monkey with this until it eventually goes in. But I can't do that until the alternator is in place, so I can get this run through the bracket to the mounting ear of the alternator, and then behind the mounting boss of the alternator, I've got to put this spacer in. Oh wait, there's more. I also have this thick washer that has to go in where this bolt goes through this front bracket, the mounting pivot boss of the alternator, this spacer, that washer, and then finally bolts into the head. Now I say that because doing that is a real pain in the butt. Even with the stock alternator, and I don't know what I'm in for with this new alternator. I might be in for even more of a surprise than I expect. I don't know yet. I will find out. Okay. The alternator is only 15 pounds. It doesn't sound like a whole lot until you are using one arm to suspend it for a period of time. In my case, my left arm is not as strong as it used to be years ago because of a nerve pain in my neck. And what I'm going to try to do is get it in place without dropping it on this fender. This car was very, very expensive to have painted when we had it restored. I think that's a paint job, including the primer and the sanding, the wet sanding and all, was like $30,000 to $35,000 of the total expense. I don't like to think about it, but I'm glad we did it because it really turns out looking pretty good. Really good. I mean, it really is a flawless paint job. I'd like to keep it that way. So this is it, the third generation alternator. The overall distance from the pivot bolt to the adjusting arm bolt is the same distance as the original side terminal alternator that had been on this vehicle. already I see I have to make one change before I install this. This ear down here will end up having this socket plugged into it. Right now, this is pointing down towards the adjusting arm bolt, and that's not where I want it. I want it pointed more up toward the pivot arm so I can run the bolts to it without causing a problem with anything. Double check to make sure it's what I want. Okay, so what I need to do, they call reclocking, where I take out these 3 long bolts that hold the front and half and back half of the alternators together, turn the back of the case so that this is pointing in a different direction, and tighten this back down.
Go.
So to do this, I'll use a 1/4-inch drive ratchet, and I hope I can find the right size socket for that. It might be metric, I don't know. There, I found it. It's a 5/16 hex, or in my case, a 12-point socket. So what I do is I loosen these. Well, they're really in there, which they should be. But you don't want these things loosening up by themselves and backing out when the alternator is being used. And it'll cause all kinds of problems with it coming apart. And I have to be very careful to keep the front and back from separating very much. I might have to separate it a little bit.
Do you want to keep that like on a flatter surface?
Oh, I'm fine here.
All right.
If the front and rear become too separated, the brushes inside will become detached from where they belong, and then I've got to take the whole thing apart, pin the brushes back where they belong, and then reassemble it and try again. On the older first generation alternators, we had to separate them about 1/8 of an inch to get the housing front and rear to both turn against each other. I had never done a 3G reclocking. How hard could it be? Well, we're about to find out. How boring, huh? If anybody watching this video feels they want to skip ahead, get past this part of unscrewing the housing front and rear, I won't be offended. I won't even know. Okay, the 3 bolts are out. Here is the pivot boss for the mount and the adjusting arm boss for the lower mount. And I want to rotate this counterclockwise a little bit. Well, I need Linda to hand me a flat tip screwdriver.
I gotta pause this. Go.
Okay, I have a flat tip screwdriver I'm going to use to carefully pry the front and rear apart from each other a little bit. Just enough so I can rotate the front and rear shell away from each other as I line up the plug socket. Okay, I felt something move. Sounded like it might be ready to start to think about letting me turn it. Maybe. Yes. Now, let's see if I can turn this. Yeah. Close, not quite. Very close. Okay. That should be enough. Okay, so now I want this a little closer toward me. Not quite, almost. The top part is free, this bottom part is still pressed in a little bit. Well, might as well prepare to reset the bushing brushes. I have a feeling this isn't going to let me off the hook easy. I'm just thinking, is that really what I want to do? And yeah, I think it is.
Explain again why you want that turned a different angle.
This is the bottom mount for the alternator.
Right.
Here's the top pivot.
Right.
Here is the wiring that plugs in.
Right.
And the lead that goes to the battery is right here.
Mm-hmm.
This is going to be in the bottom side of the alternator, pointing toward the bottom of the car. I want it turned so that it's pointing more up than down. And the only way to do that is to reclock this. The problem with reclocking is if I pull these apart too far, there are two brushes inside here that ride against the armature. They're spring loaded. If I pull this out too far, they'll release, and then I got to take the back apart and use a safety clip, paper clip, straightened out to hold the brushes back in their housing and reassemble it again.
You did that last time, I remember.
It's a lot of tedious work. It's not hard. I can do it. And it might turn out, I'll end up doing it anyway. Oh, there we go. I got it turning. Well, that's the whole thing. I don't want the whole thing to turn necessarily.
Still think, let's get it down on a flatter surface, not the car, and let's bring it over here and let's work on it. You need to anyway, if you got to do all that you're talking about.
Let me clear off some room in the back. Linda suggested that instead of working on this on the fender of the Mustang, even with the protective thick foam cover, I'll come over to a workbench and finish it off. Well, she's right. I should have thought to do it earlier, but I'm stubborn. I wanted to point a few things out before I continue. First of all, on the first generation alternators, there are 4 bolts that hold the front, rear, and center pieces together. This is only 3. So when I reclock an older one, I can reclock it in increments of 90 degrees at a time. With this, with 3 bolts, it has to move 120 degrees, so it's a lot more movement when reclocking. And that might be why it was clocked where it is right now, because when I have it clocked in where it's going to be, this is going to be pointing more up in air. Now, I'm not worried about water getting down there because these are made to deal with water splashing on them. And I don't drive this Mach 1 when it's wet outside. It's a dry weather car. So that's the first thing I want to point out. The other thing is I was not positive if this center piece rotated with the back half or the bottom half, or neither, because I've never rebuilt a 3rd generation alternator. So this is kind of new to me. So I cheated. After I moved here to the bench, before we restarted this video, I went on YouTube and I searched on Ford 3rd generation alternator reclock. And sure enough, there's a guy who shows how he reclocks these generators. What he did, he loosened the 3 bolts like I did, and then he got a plastic mallet and he tapped on the mounting boss on the front half while keeping the center and rear in one position. So that answered my question. The rear and center stay together. It's the front part that gets moved. Now, I don't have, surprisingly enough, of all the tools I've got, I do not have a plastic mallet or hammer. And I don't know where my old rubber hammer is, a rubber mallet. So I'm going to carefully use a small hammer. Yes, 1 or 2 claws is broken. This belonged to my father-in-law. I don't know who broke it off, but I hope someone did it when they're having fun with it. So this I'm going to use to tap its lower mount as I hold these 2 in place until I've rotated it counterclockwise 120 degrees. And then I'll rebolt it back down.
Moving, but it looks like it's coming up too.
It might be.
Definitely moving.
Yeah, it's moving. I'm sure somebody somewhere is going to comment about how I could have put this one half in the vise and use a device to hold these 2 together and then rotate it manually. And you know what? You're right. I probably could. But this is working. And that counts for something. Now, I'm not hitting it hard, because hitting it hard, I could end up damaging the cast metal. I don't want to do that. Getting there. Now the reason I'm going back and forth is in case the shell, center or rear, starts getting cattywampus on me as I'm hitting it. I want it to be as smooth a transition as possible. And I am only a few degrees away from all this lining up. Okay. So now I will try to get these bolts in place and get them threaded. I use them to pull these pieces together and just hope that I didn't have it apart so far at any point that it caused the brushes to jump. Seems to me if the brushes had jumped out, I wouldn't be able to put this thing together right now. It would resist being assembled again. Now, I could, if I wanted to, get my 1/4-inch electric impact wrench and tighten these down, but sure as tomorrow sunrise comes up, if I do that, I can hear somebody comment about how I shouldn't have. Well, you might be right. The reason I'm not doing it is because Linda has been so patient with me. I'm not going to ask her to go get it for me just to save a couple of moments or to show off having some nice tools. So I'll do it manually. But when I do use an impact to assemble things like this or transmissions, I typically only use it enough to run the bolt down enough so that it is secure against whatever object it is tightening against, and I'll do the final tightening by hand. And when I do it by hand, if there's a torque specification for like an engine or transmission or rear axle, I'll go ahead and I'll look it up and I'll use that torque spec. In this case, I don't think I've ever seen a torque spec on assembly bolts for an alternator. When I took it apart, it felt tight enough. So when I put it together, I will tighten it tight enough. But I will go a little bit at a time in a rotational direction to try to get them all to pull down about the same amount that they normally would. And the idea is to get them tight enough so it doesn't come apart, and to make sure all three sections are pulled together. Now this is together pretty good, so now I'm going to check and see if it still turns, and it does. If those brushes had popped out, I didn't take it apart far enough to happen, I don't think. Right now this would be jammed up, I wouldn't be able to spin it, but I'm able to spin it, so this is a good thing. I'm getting there. Okay, I'm going to do one more tightening to get it as tight as it felt when I took it apart, but I'm going to make sure it still spins first, and it is still spinning.